So that was a good song about walking in the light of the Lord. So yeah, Raven. One of my most favorite topics is the covenants. One of my favorite ones, and Raven is about to say a sermon on that.
Hello everyone, how is everybody doing today? I thank you all for coming here, and I thank you all for giving us this time to explain about what we've been learning and to show the progress, the huge progress that we've made today. So today let's start out with the covenant. What is a covenant? Can you all tell me the answer? What is a covenant? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
It's a rule.
No.
It's an agreement.
Yes, it's an agreement, exactly.
It's a promise.
Yes, it's a promise, it's an agreement, it's a treaty. It's a peace treaty, it's a compromise between two parties. So there's a lot of covenants in the Bible, but today we're only going to be looking at 3. And the first one is going to be the Abrahamic covenant. And these go in order chronologically. The Abrahamic covenant. Before we start on all the covenants, let's establish a rule that God has put down for us. Can anybody read me Galatians 3:15?
Galatians.
And again, that's Galatians 3:15.
Okay.
That's okay.
Wait,
No, don't.
wait. Galatians 3:15.
3:15.
Brothers and sisters, let me take an example from everyday life. Just as no one can set aside or add to a human covenant that has been duly established, so it is in this case. The promises were spoken to Abraham and to his seed. Scripture does not say and to seeds, meaning many people, but and to your seed, meaning one person, who is Christ. What I mean is this. The law introduced 430 years later does not set aside the covenant previously established by God and thus do away with the promise.
Yes, stop right there. So that is the rule right here. A covenant that is set before does not, a covenant that's set after, 400 years later, does not affect the covenant that has been put 400 years before. The first covenant, let's talk, this is not the first covenant, but the first covenant we are going to talk about. The Abrahamic covenant. In here, God does a specific ritual. Is in the Hebrew times, they had a certain way of doing things, and everything had symbolism. And here, it's called a blood covenant that God does with Abraham. How this ritual was done was, they were supposed to take 12 pairs of animals. They were supposed to cut them precisely in half and lay the 2 halves of the animals aside and walk through the middle of the blood. As you are walking through the blood, you are supposed to say or state your terms. And both parties were supposed to do that. Those were the rules of the agreement. They were part of the agreement. But when we look about in Genesis 15, I'll let y'all read it. You can read it on your own time, but in Genesis 15, this is where it all happens. God puts Abraham into a coma. He knows what's going on. He can hear, but he can't see. He has full faith in God. And what God does is he tells Abraham to make all of the preparations for this. And when it was Abraham's turn to walk through the covenant, to bond the covenant, God put Abraham in slumber and walked for Abraham, stating that there were no rules of the agreement or this covenant that Abraham could break. There is no such thing as this covenant was endless. There was no rules, there was no conditions to it. This covenant was like God's love, unconditional, unlimited. That's what this covenant was. That's why we are all sons of Abraham. That's why we're all priest children. That's why we're all sons of priests. That's why we are, everybody sings the song. Everybody sang the song in Sunday school. We are sons of Abraham. That is why we are sons of Abraham. We are receiving unrelentless blessing from the Lord constantly, and there is nothing you can do that will break away from that. That is why God's love is so merciless, because God has made a blood covenant with Abraham. We are sons. We are the seeds of Abraham, and that is what's happening here. And let's go on to, and this is and then we go on to the Mosaic covenant. It happens in, and can somebody read me Exodus 24:18 through 25:1?
24.
18. That's the last verse.
Okay, and Moses went into the midst of the cloud and got him up into the mount, and Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights.
Yes, he was there 40 days and 40 nights. Let's just, I'm going to tell you all what happened right before. This is in the middle of the Exodus, the journey of Moses. This is in the middle of Exodus. And where we are at right now, they've just gotten freed from slavery of the Egyptians, and they've established a place. They've reached the so-called Promised Land. And when they're at here, the Mount Sinai, at this mountain, God came down. This happened like the second like how God explained us to the second coming. God came down as a cloud and stayed on the highest hill. It's written, the ground was shaking, there was thunder, the Lord's voice was like thunder, everybody's eardrums were bursting. Imagine how scary that will be. That is how sometimes the second coming in Revelation represented. And Moses goes into the heart of the Lord. He sees Lord in eye to eye. He stays in the presence of the Lord. He stays in the divine presence of the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights. That's wonderful, isn't it? How even sometimes it's written in Revelation that you can't even look God in the eye. When you're in heaven, you can't look at God in the eye. You can't stay in his presence for more than like 30 minutes, 20 minutes. But here Moses, in his physical form, has stayed with the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights. They said when he came out looking pale, but his soul would never be thirsty again. His soul was so purified, even more purified, because of this divine energy, this divine protection that he has reached upon. And we see that we've been given laws. That's where we start. That's when he starts giving the laws. That's when we explain that. That's when God establishes government. In Canaan, this is where God establishes bureaucracy, government, punishment, consequences, and laws. Isn't that very different from the merciless God we've seen with Abraham? We've seen that in Abraham. Let's think about it. We had unrelented blessing, unrelented love. But when we come to Moses, we see that God has put laws, consequences, punishment, and he's established a government, he's established bureaucracy, established trade, all of this. God established all of this. And Canaan this is where all of our modern society came in. Look, if you go through Exodus, like 5 chapters full of rules. If this happens, if it was under this condition, and this happens, then this is your punishment. Everything was literally set in stone. And that is what is the meaning of fairness. I talk to my sister and say, whenever my dad is screaming at me and my sister, I keep saying it's unfair. You should treat her different than me. That's not being unfair, because my dad has set me rules in the house that I was supposed to follow, and I eternally break. And there were consequences. That is what God is doing here. That is what being fair is. If you look in Matthew, there's a parable of this slave owner who came in and was like, if you work for me, I will give you 3 coins. 3 coins. 3, I don't remember the name of them, but the 3 coins. And he appointed 3 different slaves at 3 different times. But still he gave the 3 people the same price, same amount of money for working. And that was fair. He never said you're working for an hour. For an hour, you're gonna get 3 coins. So that's what God is being here. God is being fair. And if you see everything here, we see as in the gospel, a lot of things that we read in Abraham, the relentless love, we see in the gospel. God being fair and putting laws. We see in the gospels. And now, since God has such made this great pact, this great agreement with Moses, he gave them a sign. We did our part of it. The Israelites. This was for the Israelites. So the Israelites did their part of it. They were acting kind. They followed the punishments. And what did God do in return? He gave a piece of the heavens, the Ark of the Covenant. We see the Ark of the Covenant. That is the most beautiful thing that could ever happen in the Old Testament. Ark of the Covenant. It is a sign of the covenant. It's a sign of peace. It's a symbol of heaven. It's a symbol of the agreement that God will protect us if we trust in Him and if we follow His laws. And we see if you read, can somebody read me Exodus 25, 18 and 20? Not enough, but can you read me Exodus 25, 18 to 20?
Exodus 25, 18 to
20. Can you go get me some water?
Another glasses.
Oh, me too.
Exodus 25,
18 to 20.
And make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover.
Yes.
Make 1 cherub on one end and the second cherub on the other. Make the cherubim of one piece with the cover at the 2 ends. The cherubim ought to have their wings spread upward, overshadowing the cover with them. The cherubim ought to face each other, looking toward the cover. Yeah, that's 18 to 20.
And we see how, do you all recognize how precise, how exact God wanted this to be? If you read further into 25 and other chapters of Exodus, God gives each and every precise instruction. You have to make this part out of acacia. You have to use this specific incense. You have to use this specific thing. And why He carefully crafted it is because this was supposed to be the sign. Everything we see here was supposed to be a piece of heaven, and we can confirm that in Revelation 4:8. I can read Revelation 4:8.
And the 4 beasts had each of them 6 wings about him, and they were full of eyes within, and the rest not day and night. They rest not day and night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, which was and is to come.
And what does that explain here? We see those beasts are supposed to be angels. They were supposed to be the true form, one of the highest ranking angels. And we see that comes forward, that comes first. And that is how we know God is coming. They were supposed to be the precursor to God in Revelation. Before anything happened, after the Great Tribulation, when God comes, before God comes, these angels come down and scream, Holy, 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 holy. they're warning. They're like, whenever kings come in India or any time, may Lord bless the king, or may Lord bless the queen. Queen blank 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 is coming, and that's what they're doing here. They are establishing that the king is coming, and that's what the two cherubims that are like this were supposed to establish, that God is here. That's what they were supposed to establish. That God is here.